Hello, I'm Ken Blakeney, and this is February 2024. I'm 75 years old now, and the primary purpose for me doing this audio is to hopefully be able to pass down some of my many years of experience and knowledge on how to start up, own, and operate a successful small business, and a few suggestions and tips on how to enrich and be successful in your everyday personal life. But before I go any further, let me say this. If you're an irresponsible kind of a person, or if you already know everything, then you probably should go no further than this, because it will just be a waste of your time. But if you are a responsible kind of a person, and you think that you might learn something from what I have to say, then I say thank you for your time, and please keep listening. So here I go. One thing that they teach you in college is that before you read any book or listen to any lecture, you should first find out about that person's qualifications. Because believe you me, there's a lot of garbage out there. So always remember that just because somebody else said so in a book or in a lecture does not necessarily mean that it's true. So you should always keep an open mind. So right about now, you're probably wondering what my qualifications are. Well, I can tell you right now, I am not any kind of a Harvard or Yale graduate, but I have enjoyed a certain amount of financial success from owning and operating my own small business for many years. So I have been there and done that. And as you probably already know, there is no substitute for experience. I have a high school education, and I have 2 years of junior college where I studied business management, and I have 2 years of VOTEC school when I graduated from the Spartan School of Aeronautics in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and where I earned my airframe and power plant aircraft mechanic license. But I think the one university that qualifies me the very most is the School of Hard Knocks, where I learned a multitude of life's hard lessons and many other things too. So, I guess you could say that I have been tempered by the fire. And in addition to all of that, I have been a supervisor or a boss at many different aircraft maintenance companies ever since I was 28 years old. And for many of those years, I once had 19 aircraft mechanics working under my supervision when I was the director of aircraft maintenance at a very large Piper Aircraft Sales and Service Company. And over those many years, I think I probably made just about every kind of a mistake that a supervisor could possibly ever make. And making mistakes, boys and girls, is what's called experience, because the definition of experience is the sum total of all of your past screw-ups. And I have a lot of experience. Everything that I am going to talk about in this audio came from many different sources. Some of those sources were from books, and other sources came from other business people, and much of it came from my very own personal experiences and from the notes that I started taking many years ago, back in the 1970s when I was attending junior college and studying business management. And then for the next many years, and every time I would experience something or hear something or see something that I thought might be useful to me in the future, I would write it down. And after 30 years of doing that, my spiral notebook had a lot of notes, and much of that information from my notes are in this audio. Okay, and now, with all of that said, let me go ahead and get started into the meat and potatoes of this audio. The federal government defines a small business as a business with 500 employees or less, but I'm going to be talking about a small business with about 10 employees or less, like the business that I owned for many years. So any business that would be bigger than 10 employees would be above and beyond my scope of knowledge and experience. This audio that I am doing for my descendants is not intended to be any kind of a step-by-step instruction guide on how to start up and how to run a small business. But it is kind of a general guide for doing just that. This audio is actually just a lot of recommendations, tips, and general rules that may be useful to somebody who would like to own and operate their very own small business, or to a person who just simply wants to gain some new friends and improve their own personal life. Okay, so here we go. So you want to start your own business. Okay, let's just dive right in and let's talk about it. I think the first thing you should ask yourself is, why do you want to start your own business? And I would bet that I already know the answer to that question. For one, you're sick and tired of making somebody else rich while you're having to do all of the hard work when you could be stuffing all of that money into your own pocket. And for two, you're sick and tired of working with a bunch of idiots because you know it's really hard to soar with the eagles when you're having to flap around with a bunch of turkeys. And the third reason is probably the most popular reason, and that is owning your own business has always been your lifelong dream, so you can be your own boss and do things your way, and there is nothing wrong with that. So now ask yourself this question: what is the holdup? Why haven't I gotten started on starting my own business? Well, I think I can answer that question for you too. For one, you don't have enough money to start your own business. And for two, you don't have enough courage to start your own business because you're really not sure if you have enough experience or not to be able to break off and do whatever it is you do on your own. And for three, you don't even know how to start a new business. And okay, those are probably some very good, legitimate reasons for not starting your own business. But let me offer a few suggestions that may be helpful to you. And first up is the lack of cash. You know, it's a funny thing about cash. Cash always seems to have something to do with our everyday life. And you know that old saying, money talks and all the baloney walks. But as I recall from all of my business courses back in college and all of the books that I have read, when a person starts a new business, he or she needs to have about 6 months of cash to live on and to operate the business with. And then hopefully, after that first 6 months, the new business will be making a good profit and enough money to live on, and enough money for the new business to survive on its own. And as far as going into a new business with 6 months worth of money, then you're going to have to figure that one out on your own. And you know, there's only about 8 different ways that you can obtain money. You could marry into money, or you could inherit some money, or you could find some money, or maybe even win some money. You could even steal some money, or maybe even counterfeit some money. But I definitely will not recommend either one of those ways because you will be caught and you will go to prison. Or you could even borrow some money from the bank, family or friends or whoever. But I wouldn't recommend doing that one either because at some point you're going to have to pay all that money back with interest. And of course, the best way to obtain money is the old-fashioned way, and that's by working real hard and legally earning it. And that's the method that I will highly recommend. And I also recommend that if you're really serious about starting your own small business, then you go right now and start a separate savings account and get a second job so you can start saving your money that will allow you to open up that new small business that you have been dreaming about for so long. Oh, and by the way, when going into a new business, every situation is different. But if possible, I would recommend not ever taking on a partner. because over the many years, I have seen many good friends become really good enemies over a business partnership. And I would also recommend staying away from any limited partners, what's called in the business world sometimes a silent partner. And those are the folks who are willing to invest the cash that we were talking about to help you get started in your new business. But the only problem is when your business becomes very successful, they get to share in the profits for an eternity. And you don't want that. And now, let me repeat myself. If possible, stay away from partnerships and also stay away from limited partners. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to the second reason as to why you haven't started your new small business. And that reason is a lack of courage. You're just afraid of leaving your regular job and that time clock because that's your security and a means of income and support. You're a chicken. Buck, 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 buck. Oh, well, don't worry about any of that because I think every one of us have a little bit of that chicken DNA in us. But seriously, people really do count on their full-time jobs as a means of security. But when you really think about it, punching a time clock for somebody else is not really very secure at all. Have you ever heard of the old pink slip? And another reason that you may have a lack of courage and afraid to break off on your own. And that's because you may be afraid that you don't have enough experience to go out and try it on your own. But let me kind of help you with that one too. As I recall from my old college textbooks, it was always recommended that a person should have at least 5 years of experience at doing whatever it is that they do before they should even think about going out and trying it on their own. Well, I do agree with that 5-year thing, and I also disagree with it. And I'll tell you why. Every situation, every business, and every trade is totally different from all of the others. There are some trades that can be learned very well in just a couple of years, and there are other trades that may take 5 years, and even some others that might even take 10 years to learn well enough to go out and try it on your own. So I will leave that one up to you. But if you feel confident and competent enough to do it on your own, then what's the holdup? You should go for it and just do it, because it's just like they say in the old business world. You need to stop the talking and start doing the walking. Yes, I do agree. To go out on your own can be very nerve-wracking, but we have an old saying in aviation for that one too. If you want to run with the big dogs, then you better get off of the porch. And now we come to the third reason as to why you have never started your dream business. And that reason is because you don't know how to start a small business, or even what you're supposed to do to stay legal. Because when it comes to the federal government, state government, the county governments, and on down to the city governments, it is nothing but red tape. So what I highly recommend is before, and that's the key word there, before you start your small business, find yourself a certified bookkeeper and a CPA firm who specializes in doing the taxes for a small business, because they can help you do whatever it takes to make you a bona fide and a certified small business, because they will already be very familiar with the government's red tape. And believe it or not, it really doesn't cost all that much for the bookkeeper and the CPA's services. And here are some more words of good advice. Never ever try to do your own taxes, because if you try, you will spend 100% of your time trying to figure out the taxes, and you'll have 0 time left to run your business, and you don't want that. And even worse than that, unless you really know what you're doing, you will most likely screw up your taxes and you will be in big time trouble with the Internal Revenue Service. And you don't want that either. In my lifetime, I have seen several people who have gotten themselves into serious trouble with the Internal Revenue Service. And it is never pretty, because I'm going to tell you what, the IRS, they don't play around. But you don't have to worry about any of that, so long as you keep your nose clean and do everything right. And I know that for a fact, because I owned and operated my own small business for many years, and I never once ever got into any kind of trouble with the IRS or the State Tax Commission. So don't worry, just do it like I did. Do everything right and do it on time, and you'll be just fine. A business has just one purpose, and that's to make a profit. And there's only three kinds of a business that can do that. There's the retail business, which some people call goods. There's the labor business, which some people call service. And then the third kind is a business that offers both goods and service. And before I go any further, let me say this. The kind of business that I'm talking about in this audio is strictly the service business, or what some people call labor, because that's the kind of business that I owned and operated for many years, and the kind of business that I know best. So let me tell you this, even though there may be some similarities, I really don't know very much at all about the retail business. You know, stores like a grocery store, or a clothing store, or a shoe store, or other retail stores like that. My entire background has been in aviation and being an aircraft mechanic, and that's it. There's only two different kinds of business ownership. There's the sole proprietorship, which means the owner of the company is fully responsible and liable for everything. And then there's the LLC, limited liability corporation type of ownership, which means the company is a standalone entity on its own and is fully responsible and liable for everything. And the owner of the LLC is just one of the employees and is not personally responsible or liable for anything. The main purpose of an LLC is to put a firewall in between the company and the owner of the company, which will hopefully insulate the owner away from any lawsuits. Many people, including myself, start their small business out as a sole proprietorship, and then later, as the business grows, convert the sole proprietorship into an LLC. Okay, so you've been thinking about it, and you've decided that you want to be a small business owner and a real entrepreneur, and that's all well and good. But before you go any further and you jump out of the frying pan and into the fire, be sure and ask yourself these questions first. Is there a demand for the product or the service that you're going to be offering? And if so, how big is that demand? And is there going to be any competition for your goods or service? And if so, how much competition? And you need to think about this too. Can you offer anything extra in the way of goods or services, or maybe just a better price that your competition cannot offer? Because if you can, then you don't have any competition, because you are the competition. Now remember, when you're answering these questions to yourself, be honest with yourself, because lying to other people is bad enough. But when you go to lying to yourself and believing in your own lies, then you're in big trouble. And just to put it another way, don't ever let your own biased opinion run hard interference with the real facts. Most all business textbooks will tell you that the large majority of new businesses will fail within a short period of time. But they will also tell you that when a business does fail, it's usually not because of a lack of demand for their product or services. It's usually because of poor management. So always keep that in mind, and don't be a poor business manager. In the business world, good management involves being organized and having your priorities straight. And the alternate to that is what's called management by crisis, which is nothing but chaos and confusion amongst your employees and your customers. So listen to me. If you start running around at Mach 2 speed with your hair on fire, then you won't get anything done right, and you certainly won't get anything done on time either. And no matter how big the demand is for your product or services, that management by crisis will put you out of business. So remember that. Always keep your business priorities straight and keep your business organized, and you'll be just fine. And there's something else that business textbooks will tell you. If a business can survive for the first 5 years, then it most likely will succeed from then on. But I can tell you right now, from my own personal experience, that I don't totally believe that, because I don't care if you've been in business for 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, you still have to go to work every day and slay the dragon just to survive. So let me remind you now that anything I say should not be set in cement, because anything I say may or may not be true anymore, because I haven't started a new business in over 35 years now, and I'm sure there have been many changes since 1989. And you know that old saying, the only thing that's constant is constant change, and there's only 3 things that I can ever remember that are constant and never change: death, taxes, and business permits. Okay, so now getting back to starting your new business. And probably the first thing that you should do is have a plan. You know, things like, what are you going to call your business? And what about your logo? And some folks can get real creative with their business name and logo by using different designs, shapes, forms, colors, and whatnot. And you can too. So think about it. And where is your business going to be located? You know, there's an old saying in the business world, location, location, location. Because depending on what kind of business it is, the location of that business can be the difference between success or failure. And speaking of the business location, and depending on what kind of business it is, let me tell you this. Many people that start out by themselves or with just one helper often work their small business right out of their own house or out of their garage. So let me give you some warning about that. Some states and cities are very strict about their commercial zoning regulations, which basically means that you cannot operate any kind of a business in a residential area. So before you start trying to run your small business out of your house, then you need to first check out the commercial zoning rules and regulations in your area. Okay, so now here's a few more things for you to think about. And what about the timing? When would be the best time of year to open your business? And what about the advertising of your business? There are many different ways of advertising, and people have to know that you're in business if you're going to get any customers. And how about contacts? What would be the best way for customers to be able to get in touch with you? And let me suggest this right now. If you're going to have a business telephone, try to pick a number that's easy for people to remember. And whatever you do, have a separate telephone for your own personal use. And never ever give out that number to your customers. Because if you do, then some of them will be calling you at 2 a.m. in the morning. And you don't want that. And these are just a few things for you to think about. So put on your thinking cap, because it's just like my old high school ag teacher used to say, use your head for something more than just a hat rack. And here is something else that you should check out. I've never done this myself, but in today's modern world, it might be a very good idea for you to use their services. But there are some small businesses out there who specialize in helping other folks get started in their own small business. And those folks know how to go about checking out your business name and your business logo to see if it's already been legally taken or not by somebody else, because it probably wouldn't be very pretty if you were to accidentally infringe on somebody else's company name or their trademark. That probably won't ever happen to you, but if it did, that could get downright ugly, and you don't want that. And those folks can also guide you in the right direction too, and help walk you through the government's red tape and help you legally get started in your own small business in your state. And they can even help you register your own company name and trademark or logo so nobody else can ever use it. And they can probably even give you some good advice, and even much better advice than I can, because they will probably be what we call up to date. Now, before I go any further, I want to mention something else here that I feel like is very important. And you've probably already experienced something like this before. But let's say you're trying to decide if you really want to start your own small business. Or let's just say you have this idea that you think is a good idea. Well, I can tell you right now, probably one of the first things that you're going to do is share your idea or your thoughts with your family and friends. And I can also tell you that the first thing that you're going to be met with is a lot of criticism. You know, things like, now that ain't going to work. You better hang on to that good job you've got and quit that dreaming. Or something similar to that. And in some cases, when you get that kind of criticism, ask them if they don't mind showing you how they did theirs so you can do yours better next time. And then watch them run like cockroaches. Well, don't let any of that negative stuff discourage you, because the new ideas from some of the richest people on this planet were probably first met with a lot of criticism from their very own family and friends. So here's my recommendation. When you share your idea with your family or friends and you're met with all that criticism, then you take a good hard look at their own track record, and that right there alone might help you make the right decision. And speaking of family and friends, you may not be able to pick your family, but you can certainly choose your own friends. And always remember, those people above you can only pull you up, and those people below you, they can only pull you down. So choose your friends wisely. And if you're a young person right now, then look around at the friends that you have right now and just visualize to yourself where you think your friends might be in about 20 years from now. And then ask yourself this question: do you really want to be just like one of them? So there you go. That's just something else for you to think about. You know, owning your own small business may or may not be for you, because it's not for everybody, because most people are happy just working for somebody else. And that's okay too. But let me offer you some words of good advice. It doesn't matter what you're doing for a living, just make sure you love doing it. Because whatever you're doing for a living, by the time you reach the age of 35, is most likely what you're going to be doing until the day you retire. So there you go. That's just something else for you to think about. But for now, let me get back to the small business stuff again. Okay, here are the steps that you probably should take in order to start your very own small business. Step number 1, open up a savings account at your local bank and save up enough money to live on for at least 6 months. Step number 2, decide on your company name and your company logo and make sure you can legally use that name and logo. Step number 3, get your employer's identification number from the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. And that number is usually referred to as just simply your EIN. Step number 4, get your state sales tax exemption permit from your state tax commission, because this is the permit that you will need that will allow you to buy products for resale and without having to pay any sales tax on those products. But keep in mind, you will still have to pay a sales tax on anything that you purchase that will be used by the company or will be used by you personally, because that permit only allows a sales tax exemption on products that you purchased for resale. And when you resell those products, then you will collect the sales tax for the state tax commission. So you be careful with that one, because that state sales tax exemption permit is not to be used for personal use. And you could get into some serious trouble if you do that. Okay, step number 5. If it's required in your state, then get your state business permit. What some people usually refer to as just simply a business license. Step number 6, go to your bank and open up a business checking account and a business savings account. And when you do that, the bank will need your federal employer's identification number, your EIN, that you previously got from the IRS. And the bank will also want to know the name of your company and the mailing address for your company. So have that ready too. Some people just simply use their home address or a P.O. box number. Or you might want to use the actual address of your business. Those choices are strictly up to you. Step number 7, get your workers' compensation insurance and your liability insurance in proper order. Because if you have an employee or a customer who gets hurt on your watch, then you could be in serious trouble if you don't have any insurance. I know the insurance is expensive, but in today's business world, it's just too risky going without it. Oh, and by the way, in the business world, having liability insurance is what people are referring to when they talk about being bonded. Okay, step number 8, and it's probably the most important step. Find yourself a good bookkeeper and a good certified public accountant, what's called a CPA, who specialize in keeping the books and doing the taxes for a small business and keeping you out of serious trouble with the tax folks. And now we finally come to step number 9. Go and hang out your business shingle, open your front doors, and make a lot of money because you are now a genuine and certified and bona fide small business owner and entrepreneur. And while I'm at it, let me say something about being a business owner. If you're doing all the work yourself, then you're just self-employed. But if you're having other people to do the work for you, then you're a business person. And just to put it one other way, you make a living with your hands, but you make real money with your brains. And here's something that should be started on day number 1 when you first open up your new business. You're going to start accumulating many sales receipts. And you be sure and keep track of every one of those receipts and keep them all together in one box and make a note on each receipt as to what it's for, if it's for the business or if it's personal, because your bookkeeper will need to know. And just remember, your bookkeeper and the CPA, they don't work for free. They charge by the hour. So the better your records are, the more money you will save. And who in their right mind does not want to save money? And now I'm going to say something about your rent. If you're renting or leasing a location for your business, you should always pay your rent on time and every time. And you should never bother your landlord with petty things that you can easily take care of yourself, like replacing light bulbs or fixing a loose door handle. You know, small things like that. And just remember, landlords do want your business, but they prefer good tenants. But those tenants who are always late with their rent and are always pestering their landlord with petty stuff, those are the tenants who constantly have their rent raised up. And you don't want that. So be a good tenant. Okay, so now your small business is moving right along and it's steadily growing, and the sales and service on the widgets that you offer are in high demand. And you've gotten so busy now, you need to hire some help. But always remember this, whoever you hire is going to be a representative of you and your company and your reputation. So always keep that in mind too. So anytime you're going to hire a new employee, you should first check out their background. And I don't mean the references that they listed on their resume, because they're only going to list their friends. And you know that old saying, birds of a feather all flock together. The people who you really need to talk to are the supervisors at the companies where that person previously worked. And there's another source for doing a background check. And those are the companies out there who specialize in doing background checks. And for a small fee, all you have to do is furnish them with that person's name, their date of birth, and their social security number. And they will take it from there. And as you probably already know, there are many people out there who are not seriously looking for a job. They're just seriously looking for a paycheck. And you don't want to hire any of those kind of people. And trust me, once you start interviewing people, you're going to start hearing all kinds of sob stories and how they just need a second chance and whatever. But please, always keep this in mind. You're trying to maintain a good business and a good reputation. You're not a halfway house for a bunch of druggies or a bunch of alcoholics or any other kind of deadbeats out there. And I can tell you this from personal experience. If you hire anybody like that, all you're going to get out of it is a big heartburn, guaranteed. And always remember this too. Your other employees are also depending on your success because they have a family to support too. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the job interview when hiring a new employee. And I'm going to look at it from both ends, both from the employee's point of view and from the employer's point of view. Because I've been on both sides, so I know just a little bit about what I'm talking about. So here we go. And the first one up is the employee. A good resume may be out of style for some generations, but resumes were very much in style back during my time. So if an employer wants to see your resume on a job that you are seeking, then listen up, because here are some words of good advice. A good resume should be only 1 to 2 pages long, and that's it. And your resume should be tailored to the particular job position that you are applying for. And it should be letter perfect with no misspelled words, and it should have good grammar. And a good resume should be as short as possible and to the point, and for a couple of good reasons too. For one, an employer is busy and they just don't have the time to read page after page about your life. And for two, an employer really doesn't care about your life as much as you do. So keep that resume down to just a couple of pages if possible, because an employer is usually only interested in just one thing, and that's if you have enough education or the right kind of experience that will be beneficial to the employer's business. And before I go any further, let me say something else about your resume. Some people like to include a small picture of themselves on their resume, and that's okay. But if you do that, please use a current picture of yourself and not a picture that's 20 years old. Okay, so now you've got an appointment for a job interview. And the most very important thing to remember, and don't forget this, you will never, ever get a second chance to make a first impression. Don't ever forget that. And that doesn't apply just for job interviews. That also applies in your everyday life. And people will always judge your character based on that first impression. And always remember this too. Other people's perception of you will always be different than the perception that you have of yourself. It's just human nature. And now back to that job interview again. In most cases, the person doing the interview is a generation older than the person being interviewed. So you better take that into serious consideration. And just remember, just because you believe in dressing this way or acting that way may not be what they believe in. And they're going to be the person who is deciding your future. So you better dress and act appropriately. And just always remember that job interview should include a good appearance and a good attitude. And before you walk in there, make sure you don't have any body odor and you don't have any halitosis, what most people call bad breath. because employers don't generally like to hire anybody who stink. And unless you're applying for a plumber's job or a mechanic's job, make sure your fingernails are clean. And after you get in there and you sit down, sit up straight in your chair and mind your manners. You know, yes sir, no ma'am, thank you, please. You know, all those things that you were taught when you were growing up. Show the employer some respect, because that may be the difference between you getting the job or not getting the job. So think about it. And when you walk into that employer's office and you shake his or her hand, make it a firm hand grip, because you don't want your hand to feel like it's just some old dead, limp, cold fish. And you look them straight in the eye and tell them your name. And then you tell them that you really appreciate the opportunity for this job interview. And say it like you really mean it too, because you really should mean it. And then you should tell them that you would like to work with their company and not just for their company, because that makes it much more personal. And whatever you do, never bring up the money thing or the benefits thing, because the employer will eventually get around to that part of it if the employer is interested in you. And then if you do reach that part of it during your job interview, then you can go ahead and start negotiating the wages and benefits. And remember too, employers don't hire people because they're nice guys. Employers hire people because they need some help. So all you have to do is just make sure that you do a better job interview than everybody else who are applying for that same job. And remember, always be honest on your resume and be honest about what you say, because that way you never ever have to remember what you said. And that doesn't apply to just job interviews. That also applies to everyday life. Because if there's one thing that everybody appreciates, that's honesty. And now, back to that job interview again, and from the employer's side. The one thing that I always did when I would interview a prospective employee, I would make it crystal clear as to what their duties and responsibilities are going to be, so there'll be no misunderstandings down the road. And I would also tell my employees that I will never ask them or tell them to do anything that I wouldn't do or haven't done myself. And I would also tell my employees that I will never ever ask them or order them to do anything that's either illegal or immoral. And as far as the employee being aware of what the employee's duties and responsibilities are going to be, some companies use what's called an SOP, a Standards Operating Procedures Manual, that shows the flow chart, the chain of command, and it specifies the employee's exact duties and responsibilities. And on the day that the employee starts to work, the employee must read and sign the Standards Operating Procedures Manual. And now, with all of that said, you should ask yourself these questions. How much should you pay your employees? And what kind of benefits should you provide for your employees? Well, now, I'm just going to have to leave that one up to you. But I can tell you this, if you're going to keep good employees, you're going to have to be very competitive, because employees are also human and they're always looking for the best pay and the best benefits. But I can also tell you this from personal experience. Many employees will stay with the company simply because they really like that company and they like the owner, and the pay and the benefits just doesn't seem to matter that much, so long as he or she can make a decent living on what they are being paid. So there you go. Treat your employees real good, and they're more likely to stay with you. Now, every business and every situation is different, but I can tell you this, I treated all of my employees really good, and to this very day, even after all of these many years, several of my past employees still stay in touch with me. So I must have done something right. And let me mention something else here about being a good employer. It just kind of comes with the territory, I guess. But during a normal work day or a normal work week, a good employer will have to wear several different kinds of hats. And of course, the first hat is the boss's hat. And another hat is a teacher's hat. And we've got the marriage counselor hat. And sometimes we're going to have to wear the therapist hat. And we've got the referee's hat. And there might even be some occasions when you'll have to wear a parent's hat. But the one hat that used to get under my skin the most was sometimes having to wear the babysitter's hat. Every once in a while, you will have an employee who will be missing some work for whatever reason. So always try to offer that employee a way to make up that time that they missed. Because remember, they have to make a living too. And remember too that sometimes you'll be so busy that you need your employees to work overtime. And when that happens, you should remind them that they're being paid time and a half, which makes overtime a luxury and not a punishment. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about something that every employer will sometimes have to do. And it's usually no fun at all. And that's when the employer has to terminate an employee. I never did enjoy having to do that, but I look at it this way. I didn't terminate the employee. They terminated themselves when they broke the rules, and especially when they cost you a lot of money when they broke the rules. And here are some words of good advice. If you have to terminate an employee, you do not want them to see it coming, and you don't want to do it in front of any of your employees or in front of any of your customers. You want to do that in private. You hand them their paycheck that's paid up through that work day, and you part company right then. It's no fun at all having to terminate an employee, but sometimes it must be done if you're going to keep your business going. Oh, and by the way, as far as letting a terminated employee go immediately, this also applies to any employee who gives you their 1 or 2 week notice of their leaving the company. And the reason that you let employees go immediately is because you don't want to give them the opportunity to do any sabotage or any stealing from your company. Because believe it or not, there really are some people out there who are just mean enough to do just that. So here's the deal. As long as you're in business, you're going to have employees who are coming and going for whatever reason. And every situation is different. So you'll have to figure out how to handle each one of those cases on your own. Okay, so now you're up and running and you have your business going and you are selling and servicing those widgets like they are hotcakes. And in fact, you've gotten so busy in the last few weeks that you've had to go out and hire 2 employees just so you can keep up with the demand for your widgets. And then 2 weeks after that, payday comes. Uh-oh, how are you going to handle this one? Because you're just too busy running the business and you just don't have the time to sit down and figure out the payroll for your employees. And you don't know how to do it because you've only ever had to sign the back side of a paycheck. You've never had to sign the front side of a paycheck. And you don't have a clue as to how to do the payroll properly. But it's got to be done because it's the law. You'll have to figure out their federal taxes and their state taxes and their Social Security. And you've got to match that Social Security and all these other things and all of the other blah, blah, blah stuff. And you're the one who is responsible for withholding all of that money from your employees' paychecks and then making sure that the Internal Revenue Service and the State Tax Commission receives all of that money on behalf of each of your employees. And another thing that you are responsible for come January of each year, and that's making sure that all of your employees, both past and present, receive their W-2 forms that will show the exact amount of money that you withheld from their paychecks during that taxable year. And I'm going to tell you what, this must all be done correctly and on time, or you'll be facing some big time fines and penalties. Because trust me, the tax folks, they don't play around. Okay, so how are you going to handle the payroll? Because time is money. And if you have to sit down for several hours every week to do the payroll, then you may lose a lot of money just because you've had to take away some of your own time away from running your business. So you might ought to consider having your bookkeeper do the payroll for you. So all you will have to do is just sign the front side of that paycheck for your employees. And there's a couple of other ways for doing the payroll. For one, there are some computer programs out there that can assist you and make it much easier for you to do the payroll. And for two, there are some other companies out there who specialize in doing the payroll for other companies. Okay, so now that we've got the payroll thing solved, let's now move along to the next business item. And this item can be one of the very most important items, so you better listen up. Let's say you've been in business now for about 6 months and everything has been going really well. And oh my gosh, the demand for your widgets has just gone totally nuts and you're making money hand over fist. And then one day you notice that your business checking account is just getting fatter than a hog. And gosh, you've never made so much money in your entire life. And whoa, stop, put on the brakes, because it's right here where a new business owner will sometimes get into serious trouble because they start going out and spending all of that money like drunken sailors because they are forgetting that that money is not all theirs, because a large chunk of that money belongs to the Internal Revenue Service and the State Tax Commission. And those folks, they don't like nobody going out and spending their money. And in fact, there have been many people who have gone to prison for doing just that. I think the tax folks call it tax evasion. So to stay out of trouble with the tax folks, my recommendation to you is for the first year or two to just keep living on the small budget that you originally set up for yourself when you first started your business. And then later, at the end of the taxable year, your CPA will figure out just how much of that money is really yours and how much of that money belongs to the tax folks. And then after your first year in business, your CPA will try to make a good guess at how much money you're going to make the following year. And based on that guess, you will start making estimated tax payments every 3 months. And those estimated tax payments are what most business people call quarterlies. But don't worry about any of this stuff. Just keep your nose clean and pay your dadgum taxes on time, and everything will be just fine. Now, I don't know much about tax stuff, but I do know this from personal experience. The first time you write a check to those tax folks, you're going to be furious. But don't worry about that either, because you will get used to it. Just remember, paying your taxes is a necessary evil. And paying taxes is not what makes me mad. Because it's our tax money that supports our military. And it's our tax money that pays for our public schools. And it pays for our roads and bridges that we need. And our national parks that we enjoy. And many other things too. But what makes me mad is what our politicians do with our tax money. With their pork barrel spending and their waste. That's what makes me mad. Because a politician and our tax money is just like an alcoholic and a bottle of booze. They never, ever get enough of it. Okay, so now I'm going to get off of my soapbox about taxes and get back to the widget business again. Your business is growing, you're getting busier every week, and you've had to hire some more employees, and now you're beginning to wonder if and when you should hire a secretary. Well, I think I can answer that question for you. When your business gets so busy and you drive off to work one morning and you meet yourself coming back from work, then you need a secretary. A good secretary will take a big load off of your shoulders and a lot of stress off of your mind, which will allow you to spend more time running your business more efficiently. So here is what I recommend. When a small business gets up to about 6 or 7 employees in size, that's usually when that business needs to hire a secretary. You know, that person who can help you answer the phone and talk to customers and run the errands for you and help you with the work orders and keep track of the purchase orders and the sales receipts and 100 other things. Yeah, that person, a secretary. Oh, and by the way, a good secretary might even be able to help you with that payroll that we talked about earlier. Salaries and wages is the biggest expense of any business. So when it comes to salaries and wages, never pay your employees any more money than they are willing to work for. But just remember too, if it's not enough money, then they'll just leave and go find somebody who will pay more money, because that's just the way capitalism works. But then again, you could have an employee or two who you would never want to lose. So there is nothing wrong with paying them just a little bit better. But as far as normal raises go, I've always been more of a believer in the merit system rather than the seniority system, because the merit system is based on what or how much the employee can do for the company, whereas the seniority system is usually just for government workers or union workers. And here is something else that I still remember from some of my old business management textbooks. Now, this does not apply to everybody, but for most people, it doesn't matter how much money the employee is making, whether it's minimum wages or if it's maximum wages. But most everybody believes that they are worth just about 10 to 20% more than what they are currently making. It's just human nature. And in addition to good pay, there are some other incentives that you should think about, like maybe paid health insurance, bonus checks, paid vacation time, a pension plan for retirement, and maybe even some perks too, like access to the company's pickup truck on weekends. You know, things like that. But that's all up to you and whatever you think you can afford for your employees. So put on your thinking cap and see if you can come up with some kind of an extra benefit for your employees, and something that your competition has never thought about before. But talking about company benefits, I'm going to mention something here about sick pay. Over the many years, I have worked for companies who offered sick pay. Now, I've never done this myself, but I've seen many employees abuse that benefit. Because, you know, I've always noticed that many employees only get sick on a Friday or on a Monday. Now, you can do whatever you want to do, because that's strictly up to you. But here's the way I used to handle vacation pay and sick pay. Every year on the employee's anniversary date, and I'm talking about the date the employee went to work for my company, I would hand that employee a paycheck for 2 weeks of work. And then I would tell the employee, this is for 1 week of vacation and 1 week for being sick. And whatever you want to do with it is up to you, because it's your money. But I would also remind the employee too that if they take any vacation time or if they get sick, that they have already been paid for that time off. And you know, it's a funny thing too. Even though some of my employees would take their vacation time, very few of them ever got sick. But there were some occasions when an employee would show up to work sick, and I'd have to make that employee go back home because I didn't want any of the other employees getting sick. But I can tell you this too, if it was a good employee, they never missed any pay, because I always made sure of that. Now, this method that I always used for vacation pay and sick pay always seemed to work out really well for me and the employee. Oh, and by the way, The employees who were with me for 5 years or more, I paid them for 2 weeks of vacation and 1 week of sick pay. Oh, and I have one more, by the way, that concerns being sick. The owner of the company, that being you, are never allowed to be sick. And if you don't believe me now, then you will believe me later, after you get back to your company from having to be gone for a few days, and you find the great big mess that happened while you were gone. And then suddenly it will hit you right between the eyes, and the meaning of this phrase will become crystal clear. Nobody cares about your business like you care about your business. And trust me, because I have been there and done that. Now here is something that I personally recommend that you do. Every once in a while, tell your employees that you really do appreciate the good work that they're doing for you. Because everybody on this planet likes to feel like they are important, and they like to feel like they are needed. And when you do that, you have just psychologically planted a seed in their brain that will be constantly telling them that they now have a good reputation that they must live up to. And that's exactly what you want. And every now and then, during a normal workday, you should treat all of your employees to a good lunch just to show them your appreciation for their good work. And there's something else too. Always make your employees feel like they're part of the team, because they really are a part of your team. And trust me, happy employees working in a happy environment equals happy profits for your company. And that's exactly what you want. Okay, so moving on past your employees' wages and benefits, you may be wondering, how much should you be charging your customers for your services or for your labor? Well, this formula probably doesn't apply in every case, but as a general rule, you take your employees' average pay and you multiply that by 3. And that's what you should be charging your customers for your labor or for your services. But keep in mind too, that's just a general rule of thumb and is not set in cement, because you will have to take your competition into consideration. And again, the laws of economics and capitalism will be dictating the labor rate that you're going to be charging your customers. And always remember this too, there will be some times that your business is going to be very slow, and you may have to cut your price down to the bare bone, to the point to where there is very little profit or no profit at all. But at least you can keep your employees busy and not have to lay anybody off. And there's an old saying in the business world that 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. But hopefully, having to ever cut your price down that low would just be a temporary thing to help you get through a lean time until business picks back up again. Because there's another old business saying for that one too. If a business ain't growing, then it's dying. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about advertising your business. The business textbooks will tell you to reinvest at least 10 to 20% of your profits right back into your business advertising, because you're going to be losing customers due to some of them moving away or passing away, or those who just simply don't need your services anymore, or whatever. So keep that in mind too. And speaking of good advertising, you can chisel this statement in granite. Your best advertising is word of mouth by your customers. And that can be either good or bad. And remember, a good reputation travels really slow, but a bad reputation travels faster than a wildfire. And trust me, you don't want no wildfires. Okay, so here we go. This will be your typical day at the office. You should always arrive to work at least 30 minutes before any of your employees arrive. And this should give you plenty of time to get everything ready. Like turn on the lights, set the thermostat, make the coffee, have everything ready for your employees so when they arrive to work, they can go right to work without having any slack time, because slack time is a real profit killer, which makes that old saying very true. Time is money. Just about any kind of a business that there is out there must operate at about 70% efficiency just to break even. And anything above that is in the profit zone. Keeping a business running at 100% efficiency is almost impossible because there are some things that are just absolutely necessary. Like, for instance, a couple of break times for your employees every day. And then there's the occasional 5-minute meeting with all of your employees. Or maybe having the employees having to stop working 5 minutes before quitting time every day so they can clean up and straighten up the big mess that they made during the day while they were working on the widgets. And a few other things like that that just cannot be avoided. But the main thing is to try to keep all the slack time down to a minimum so you can keep your profits up to a maximum. And I can tell you right now how to get rid of a lot of slack time. And that's when you divide your employee's hourly wage by 60 and you see how much you're paying that employee by the minute. And I guarantee you that right there alone will get rid of a lot of slack time. And speaking of the profits, it's always been recommended that a business put away at least 10% of its profits into a separate business savings account every month. And then a large portion of that 10% should be reinvested back into the company in the form of newer or updated equipment. One of the biggest profit killers in any business is having to do rework. And you know how it goes. We don't have enough time to do the job right the first time, but we got plenty of time to have to go back and redo it all over again. And what's really frustrating is the fact that most rework could have been avoided to start with if only the employees would have taken the time to do the job right the first time. So always stress to your employees that you are more concerned with their accuracy than you are with their speed. And there's something else that's very frustrating too that you should always try to avoid. And that's what I call the construction worker's frame of mind. And it kind of goes like this. We don't have enough time to finish this job because we've got to get started on the next job. And I'm telling you, that not only frustrates the employer, but that will also frustrate your customer. And you don't want that. And just to mention another profit buster, and that's when you have an employee leaving their workstation and spending too much time in the restroom or sneaking around and hiding and talking to their family and friends on their mobile phones when they're supposed to be working. And I can tell you right now how to solve that problem. Do not allow any of your employees to bring their mobile phones or their mobile devices with them to work. And if there's any emergencies in their personal life, then they can contact you, and then you will contact the employee. And that's it. Problem solved. But talking about those mobile phones, you can do what you want to do. But here's what I used to do. I would always tell my employees that when they're on their own time, like during their break time or lunch time, they can go out to their cars and play on their mobile phones all they want to, so long as they're on their own time and not on my time. Now here is something that I have never read in a business textbook. It's just something that I have noticed over the years. The happiest employees at a company are the ones who always show up about 5 minutes early every day. And it's those same employees who tend to always work about 5 minutes over every day. And the employees who are unhappy are the ones who just barely make it to work on time every day. And it's those same unhappy employees who can hardly wait to get off from work at quitting time every day. So there you go. If you ever get slow enough to where you're going to have a layoff, you certainly want to try to keep your happiest employees. And if you've been paying attention, then you'll certainly know who they are. And speaking of layoffs, should your company ever get so slow that you're going to have to lay somebody off, just remember, there's no such thing as tenure or seniority in a small business. That's all union stuff, because you need to keep your producers and cut loose your dead weight if you're going to survive. And just to mention a couple of other things here, an employer should never ever tolerate an employee being late to work all the time, or an employee constantly complaining about something all the time. And the reason being is because if you let one employee get away with being late all the time, then the first thing you know, all the other employees think they can be late all the time too. And you don't want that. And if you have an employee who is constantly griping all the time, then that tends to rub off on all the other employees. And then the next thing you know, all your other employees will be griping all the time. And you don't want any of that either. So if either one of those problems ever arise, and they will, then you need to take care of those problems right away. And here is something else that I have noticed over the years. Back before I started my own small business, and back when I was working for bigger companies, I always noticed that when the company would hire a new general manager, it seemed like the first thing the new manager would do is go around turning off all the light switches and all the thermostats. I guess to prove to the owner how much money can be saved. But I'm going to tell you what, all that does is frustrate the employees, because employees do not like uncomfortable working environments, and they'll start looking for another job. And I'm going to tell you what, again, salaries and wages is every company's largest overhead expense, and any utility bills pales in comparison to that. So if you're having to turn off your employees' lights and their heat and air just to survive, then you might ought to think about just going ahead and closing your doors, because you're just about out of business anyway. So just remember, if your business slows way down, then what you need to do, instead of going around and turning off thermostats and light switches, you need to be out there beating the bushes and bringing in some new customers, because that's where your money comes from that keeps you in business. And in the business world, that turning off light switches and thermostats is what's called stepping over dollar bills to pick up dimes, when you should be working on some new ways to increase your customer base, because the only way for a business to make ends meet is to make those ends leap. And speaking of general managers, let me mention this. In the business world, there's something called span of control. And according to the business textbooks, once a business grows to the size of about 20 employees, the owner's span of control starts becoming out of control. And that's when a general manager should be hired. And now I'm going to mention a few other things about your customers. Yes, it's true, you should treat all of your customers like they are very special, because they really are very special, because they're the ones who put the food on your table. But it's also true that you should never ever allow a customer to browbeat you down on your price or into doing something that you really don't want to do, because trust me, if you allow that, you will regret it later. Now, I don't know what kind of a business that you're going to be in, but in some cases, it's a good idea to have the customer to sign a work order, so there will never be any kind of a misunderstanding about the price. And you can trust me on this one. When it comes down to the money and the previous agreed on price for your services, some of your customers will have the shortest memory on the planet. And let me warn you about the oh by the ways, because I've seen this one more times than I can even count. And here's the way that it always goes. The customer brings in his widget to have it repaired or serviced, and you both verbally agree on a firm price to have that done. And then the customer leaves and calls you on the telephone several hours later and says, oh, by the way, while you have my widget in your shop, would you please go ahead and replace the do-jobber and the thingamajig? And of course you agree to do that, and you tell the customer over the phone how much extra that's going to cost. And now, here comes the fun part. When the customer comes to pick up his widget and sees the final bill, then the customer will go off like a Saturn V rocket, because the customer only remembers the original price. The customer never remembers the oh, by the way price that you discussed over the telephone. No, the customer never remembers those prices. So take it from me, it's always a good idea to have the customer sign a work order that details exactly what the service will be and at what price. So there will never be any misunderstandings. Customers usually only call you when they need something, so always return a customer's phone call. Always. Because customers are humans too, and most humans don't like being ignored. And here is something else with your customers. Never answer your business phone on the first ring, and never tell your customers that your business is slow. And when you're talking face to face with a customer and everything seems to be going your way, never show your excitement that you're feeling inside, and never let them see you sweat, because you want your customer to always think that they are in total control. But be honest and be fair with your customers too, because it's just the right thing to do, and you want their repeat business. And you know, it's not just an old cliche. You should always treat others like you would want to be treated. You know, the old golden rule. And let me say something about your original customers. You know, those customers who were with you since day one. Those customers should always get priority service, because there's an old business rule about that one too. You should always dance with the person who brung you to the dance. And you should always send your customers a Christmas card. And you should call your customers on their birthday, because that's showing your customer that you care about them. And who in the world does not want to be cared about? And besides that, that's just taking care of doing good business. And now I'm going to say something about your competition. You know, those guys who are constantly trying to take away your customers. There's an old business rule about that one too. You should never ever talk bad about your competition, because if you do that, it will only make you look petty and insecure about your own business. And you don't ever want to do that. And besides, it's just unprofessional to do that. And that old rule doesn't apply just to your competition. It also applies in your everyday life. And there's an old general rule for that one too, that goes like this. If you can't say something good about somebody, then just don't say anything at all. But now back to your competition again. You should always keep tabs on what your competition is doing, because you certainly would never want your competition to get ahead of you on anything. And always remember, your competition is not really your enemy. They're just your adversary. But if you're one of those people who believe that your competition is the enemy, then just remember this old rule. Always keep your friends close to you, but keep your enemies even closer. And here is something that I feel like is worth mentioning in this audio. Every now and then, we are all faced with a situation that requires us to make a decision. So please, when that situation arises and somebody says black, don't just jump up and holler white. Or if somebody says white, don't just jump up and holler black. So please, always look at the situation from different angles and look at the big picture, and always put yourself in their shoes and think about it for a while, because believe it or not, they may be right. So never make any fast or rash decisions. So think about it. How many times in your life have you heard somebody say, gosh, if only I could go back and do it all over again, I would have done it different. Or I would have said it different. You see, this is what I'm talking about. Always activate your brain long before you engage your mouth, and things will usually work out just fine. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the con artist, and these are the folks who like to win your confidence just before they stab you in the back. In fact, that's how they got their name, con artist. And they come in many different sizes, shapes, and forms, both men and women, and they are truly the scum of the earth, because they wouldn't mind taking away their own mother's last penny. I will never understand why they do what they do. But fortunately for me, I can usually spot one of them from a mile away. Now, I don't mean to make you paranoid about con artists, but you do need to know that there are many of them out there, and they're out there to get you. Every con artist who I have ever met is always well-dressed, well-groomed, well-spoken, very polite, and always have a smile on their face. And many con artists will tell you how they are so involved in the church. They sing in the choir, they teach Sunday school, and they'll also tell you about their time that they spend volunteering at the local orphanage. And they'll even tell you all about the personal sacrifices that they've had to make in order to take care of their elderly parents. And the list of the good things that they do just goes on and on. And here is something else that many con artists will do. Some con artists will even stick their hand out there and say something like, "My handshake and my word is my bond." So just remember, if any of them do that to you, then please don't walk away from that deal, because you better run. And that's just part of the con person's act in order to start winning your confidence. And we've all heard some other people say something like, "Gosh, I consider myself a smart person, and I even fell for their scam." Well, the reason they fell for their scam is because con artists are really good at what they do. And if you will notice, almost every con person's scam has something to do with other people's greed or their sympathy. So remember, anytime some other person approaches you with a good deal that sounds just too good to be true, well, that's because it really is too good to be true. So don't forget that. And never ever allow sympathy or greed to overtake your own good common sense. Because if you do, you could lose your shirt to a con artist, and you don't want that. And here are some words of good advice. Unless you know that person really well, then you keep your wallet zipped up and folded up, and you'll be just fine. I don't understand con people, what some people call wolves in sheep's clothing, and I don't know why they think like they do. But I do know this, there's only two kinds of people who sleep good at night: those with a conscience and those with no conscience. I wish it was a perfect world, but it's not. So besides just the con artist, you're also going to have to deal with the liars and the thieves in your everyday life. I once read some things in a psychology book many years ago on how to spot a liar. And here are some of those things that I still remember that may be useful to you in your business and in your everyday life. Now, this may not be true in every case, but liars tend to always use even numbers when they're telling their lies. You know, like, I went fishing and I caught a 12-pound catfish. It's never an odd number. It's always an even number. And liars also tend to look people straight in the eye while they're telling their lie. And in fact, that might even be where we get that saying from. Oh my gosh, that person can look you straight in the eye while they're telling you a lie. And speaking of the liar's eyes, there's something else to watch for too. Some liars even tend to blink their eyes just a little bit faster than normal when they're telling their lie. And the next thing is, some liars tend to stroke their own hair or touch their own face with their hand while they're telling their lie. And here's something else that you should remember. Sometimes you can catch a liar with your own lie, because it's just like I've always said. The best thing about telling the truth is you never ever have to remember what you said. So when there comes a time when you think that an employee or a customer or even somebody else might be lying to you, then you might ought to try this. When that person is telling you their story, try to pretend like you've got something else on your mind and you're really not paying very much attention to what they are saying, when in fact you're really paying very close attention to what they are saying. And then wait a few minutes and then bring out your own lie. "Oh, I'm sorry. When you were talking, I had a lot on my mind and I just wasn't paying very close attention to what you were saying. So could you please repeat all of that again, please?" So when they start telling their story for the second time, see how it lines up with the story that they told the first time. And of course, you know the rest. Most people who lie are just trying to gain some kind of an advantage. But we also have what's called the pathological liars. And these are the liars who will lie just to lie, and for no other reason. And there's a saying for those kind of liars too. A pathological liar had rather climb up in a tree and tell a lie, when standing on the ground and telling the truth would have been easier and even better. So go and figure that one out. I will never understand why liars and thieves do what they do, but I do still remember something that was in one of my old psychology textbooks from my college days. The liars, the thieves, the burglars, and all those kind of people have all justified in their own minds that what they do is not bad, because they can all come up with 6 different ways from Sunday as to why it's okay to do what they do. And there's something else about those kind of people too. They all tend to be just a little paranoid, and they're constantly looking over their own shoulder because in their own mind, they think everybody else out there are also liars and crooks, just like they are. And here's something kind of funny that I used to do sometimes. Back when I was still running my business, I would sometimes tease some of my customers and say, I will never lie to you about anything, unless, of course, I think that it might be to my advantage. And that always got a good laugh. And believe it or not, when I would sometimes use that funny line, it seemed to me like that my customer would trust me even more. And there's something else that I have noticed over the years about liars. People who lie will also steal, because lying and stealing just seems to go hand in hand with each other. So if you have an employee who you know has been lying to you, then be careful, because that employee might also be stealing from you. So there you go. These are just some things for you to be thinking about. Con artists, liars, and thieves. And here is something else that I think is worth mentioning in this audio, and that's about your handwriting. And this is right out of one of my old college psychology textbooks. And that is, most people tend to believe that those who have good handwriting and who print well are intelligent people, whether they are or not, and vice versa. So, if your handwriting in printing looks like just chicken scratch, then you might want to go and practice your penmanship and try to do something about it. Unless, of course, you had rather just go on through life being a dummy. So think about it. And there's something else too that I would like to mention about handwriting, and that's the handwritten cover letter, along with a resume and an application when applying for a job. It may not be as popular today, but back in my time, a handwritten cover letter was very popular. And I'm telling you right now, those handwritten cover letters that look just like chicken scratch would always find themselves in file number 13, also known as the trash can. And there's something else that is very important in today's modern world of keyboards everywhere, and that's knowing the proper way to hold your hands on a keyboard when you are typing. Because if all you know how to do is hunt and peck on a keyboard, then I suggest that you go and do something about that too. So there you go. If you want to stand head and shoulders above everybody else, then you need to have good handwriting, print well, and make that keyboard smoke whenever you are typing. You should go to work every day with a smile on your face and in a happy frame of mind, and for 2 good reasons too. For 1, employees don't like a grumpy boss, and for 2, customers don't like dealing with grumpy business people. Unless you've had some bad trauma in your past or you have some health issues, being happy is really just a state of mind. You can either choose to be happy or you can choose to be sad. It's really your choice and totally up to you. Our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, he was a smart man, and he once said that most people are just about as happy as they have made their minds up to be. He was right then, and that still holds true today. So try to make up your mind to be happy, and everybody around you will be happy too. Okay, so now I'm going to mention something here that could possibly enrich your personal life. And that's having yourself a hobby. And having a hobby might even save your sanity. Because it doesn't matter if you're an employer or an employee. Everybody needs to get away from work every now and then. You know what they call the old salt mine or the old grind? And always keep in mind, too, that you're supposed to work to make a living. You're not supposed to live just to work. Because if you're just working all the time, then you're missing out on a lot of good things in life. And you don't want to do that. Everybody needs to get away from work every now and then so they can decompress and regain their sanity. So don't be a couch potato who sits around doing nothing after work and on weekends. Do something that you really love to do and make it your hobby. And when you do that, you will start meeting other people who share your exact same interest. And then the next thing you know, you'll be attending all of those meetings that concerns your hobby and exchanging ideas and making new friends. A list of different hobbies can go on and on. You have your stamp collectors and your coin collectors, and you've got your rock collectors, who people like to call rock hounds, and some people like to brew their own beer, and some other folks enjoy photography as a hobby. There are literally thousands of different kinds of hobbies. Just pick one out that you love to do and do it. And I have one more recommendation. Whatever your hobby is, just make sure you're the very best at it. And you want to be the authority on that particular subject. And trust me, having a hobby that you love is a great way of keeping all of your thoughts out of that salt mine back at work. And now I would like to say something about what's called the ladder of success. Every small business owner starts out at the very bottom of the ladder of success. And as the business grows, the owner of that business starts crawling up the ladder of success, one rung at a time. And it's right here where I need to give you fair warning, because as you're going up that ladder of success, you're going to be passing some other folks. So you be careful as to whose fingers and toes that you might be stepping on. Because believe it or not, there may come a time that you'll be coming right back down that same ladder. And you're going to be meeting some of those same people who you passed when you were going up that ladder. And many of those people may still have some sore fingers and toes and a good memory. So when you're going up that ladder of success, you be careful as to whose fingers and toes that you might be stepping on. And now I'm going to mention the bridge burning. So try not to ever burn any bridges behind you, because when you're on the road to success, it's just possible that you could come to a dead end, and you may have to turn around and go back, and you'll be needing that same bridge to get back to where you came from. So always remember that, and try not to ever burn any bridges behind you. According to the dictionary, the definition of success is when a person achieves a certain goal. So ask yourself, what is your goal? Is it money? Or is it happiness? Or is it both? Or just what is it? So think about that. And some people will tell you that the definition of success is having the ability to stand back up on your own feet after you have been knocked down. But I have my own definition for success. And that's having the ability to weave through all of life's rotten baloney and still being able to come out on the other end in one piece and still standing on both feet. Now that's my definition for success. You know, business success doesn't necessarily have to be measured by how much money you make. Business success can also be measured by how much satisfaction you get out of doing something that you really love doing. So there you go. That's just something else for you to think about. Okay, so now that I've got the definition of success out of the way, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the secret to success. If you ask several different successful business owners what their secret to success is, then you'll get several different kind of answers. And basically, I agree with all of their answers. You will hear things like, you should treat all of your male customers like they are the king, and all of your female customers like they are the queen. And you'll hear, your customer is the boss, and you're the employee. And then some others will say something like, the customer is always right. And some others will even say, the secret to a successful business is good advertising. And good advertising depends on how, when, and where you advertise your business. And like I said, I do agree with all of these statements. But there was this article that I once read that struck me the very most. I once read a survey that was taken amongst about 50 different successful small business owners. And they were all asked what they thought was the most important thing on being successful in a small business. And they all had the same answer. They all said that the most important thing was to love your job and love what you're doing. And I can tell you right now, that was true for me, because I've loved airplanes ever since I can remember. And I always said that I'm one of the very few people who actually made a good living out of his hobby. And I don't remember ever having dreaded going to work on a Monday morning. And besides just loving your job and loving your work for a successful business, I would like to throw in a couple of more of my very own, because I've always said that the secret to my success was the fact that I was afraid of failure. And when you're afraid of failure, you will work 25 hours out of every 24-hour day, and you'll work 8 days out of every 7-day week. And that right there alone will guarantee you success. And the second thing that I have always said about the secret to success, and that is to always work at least one employee short, because that will guarantee that your employees will be so busy, it will be hard for them to stay up with the workload, which means there will be very little slack time. And the less slack time that you have means more profits for your pockets, and that's exactly what you want. And when you're staying that busy, that also means that your employees may have the opportunity for overtime, and that may be exactly what they want too. So it's a win-win for everybody. And let me say this, the secret to success is really no secret at all, because you will never ever meet a successful person who won't tell you about it. And just to mention something here about people in general, every person who you will ever meet is a product of the way they were raised, their education, and their past experiences. And that's what makes all of us just a little bit different from each other. But other than that, we're basically all just alike. But remember, the one thing that we all have in common is the need to be wanted. I've already mentioned the fact that everybody on this planet wants to feel important, and that's very true. And the other side of that coin is everybody on this planet always thinks about themselves first, and that is also very true. And I can prove it to you. Here it is. Whenever you look at a group photograph with you in it, whose face do you look for first? And I will bet that you don't look for your friend's face first. And the next time you are listening to a group conversation, take note of how many people are using the 3 pronouns, me, myself, and I. And while you're at it, also notice how often they use those 3 words, me, myself, and I. People only think about themselves first and nobody else. And think about this one too. How many times when you're having a conversation with somebody have they tried to interrupt you in mid-sentence because they want you to hear their story? And while it's still your turn to talk, they're still trying to get their word in edgewise. And they're not even listening to your story because they want to talk. And just maybe you do that to other people yourself. And there are many people who are obsessed with taking photos of themselves, what's called selfies. And believe it or not, there are many people who can't even walk by a mirror without stopping and admiring themselves. And I want you to think about this one too. Just how excited do you get when you have to sit for an hour with a friend and look at all of their vacation photos? My whole point is here that people only think about themselves first, and that's it. It's just human nature. A person with a headache doesn't give a hoot about starving children over in Africa. They're only concerned about their headache. And here's another good example. When two people meet for the first time, the first thing they do is forget each other's names. Why? Because they only think about themselves and not the other person. That's why. Oh, I'm sorry. What is your name again? Two of the most important things to every person is their name and their birthday. So think about it. How many people do you know, and maybe even yourself, who have their initials monogrammed onto their bathroom towels? And people love their birthdays too, and they really appreciate it when others remember their birthdays. And many people are even obsessed with their birth dates, their birthstones, and their zodiac signs. And just knowing all of these things can be to your great advantage in your small business and in your personal life. And all you have to do is just learn how to use it to your advantage. And I'm going to tell you how to do that right now. And it's really very simple. All you have to do is just learn how to take a genuine interest in other people. And I'm talking about a true genuine interest, not anything phony and not anything fake. Just start taking a genuine interest in other people. And that's it. And they will absolutely love you for it. I guarantee it. So, the next time you're talking to somebody, and it doesn't matter if it's a customer or a stranger, listen to what they have to say and keep your own mouth shut. Because after all, they are not interested in you. They're only interested in themselves. And they want you to hear their story. And I guarantee you, when you learn how to do this well, you'll be gaining new customers for your business. And you'll be gaining new friends in your personal life. And I know all of this for a fact because I've done it. And I have no doubt that you can do it too. And now, with all of that said, let me finally say this. I have really enjoyed doing this audio, and I really hope that passing down some of my experiences and knowledge about owning and operating a small business will be beneficial to somebody. And now I'm going to say good luck to you in your small business venture, and bye-bye.